Sup you phonies, how's it going? Welcome to another video. One of my subscribers asked me if I could put a miniature dragon on a table, and I was like, sure, why not? Let's try this. Effects like that are always tricky because you have to work with 3D models in a real environment, so you have to match the lighting, match the colors, and it's gonna be tricky, but we're gonna get through it. And no, I'm not gonna make the dragon myself because that would be crazy, it would take weeks of work, and I wouldn't even be capable of making something good. That's not my specialty, but if it's not your specialty either, you can just follow along just the way I do it. So I went on Sketchfab and found this very cool animated dragon, and that looks pretty sick. The maker is 3D Haupt. The credit goes to him for this model and animation. And while I'm looking at it, right here, where he's pointing up, we can have a little fire even. So we're gonna do that. So that's gonna be cool. And we're gonna do all of that in Blender. So I'm gonna download the model and I'm gonna download it as a FBX because that works very well with Blender. Now here we are in Blender. This is my little dragon. I already scaled him down. Before that he was like huge, but we don't want a big dragon, we want a small dragon. So I have my little Mihao here for scale references, so I kind of have an idea how big is he actually going to be. Maybe I'm gonna even shrink him a little more. And I just went downstairs to record my little couch table, and now we're going to use this video to track it in Blender so we can implement our 3D model in there. For that, we're gonna go here to our motion tracking tab. If you don't have that, go to plus VFX motion tracking, hit this one, but I already have it up here. Now you can open your video, you recorded yourself, or if you're part of my Patreon or YouTube members, you can just use my video and you can just follow along. Okay, this is my dirty couch table. I didn't clean it up because I wanted some tracking information. I didn't want to put stickers or anything on my table. That's what I usually would do if I wanted to track something. I just wanted to keep it natural. So I left a few objects lying around. You see those markers here, those dots and hairs. I left it all there so I can track this now. So the first thing we do is we set scene frames. Now our project is the same length like our actual video, so that's perfect. Now we hit prefetch. Now the video is rendering into our RAM so that we can watch it faster. Now I'm gonna go to the middle of my video and go in my tracking presets. I'm gonna select blurry footage, that usually works best for me. I'm also gonna hit normalize, and now I'm gonna detect features. So that's gonna give me lots of tracking markers I can use to track my footage. It's probably gonna be too many, so I'm gonna delete some where I know I'm not gonna need them, like these here on the side, because I know my dragon is gonna be right here. Let's delete this one. This one is also not gonna work. That one is fine. Okay, now we hit A and we track forward. Now when we go through it, we can see that the track from the first look at looks pretty good, but let's just hope for the best right now, because sometimes tracking can be a big pain in the butt, so be aware of that. Now we're gonna go to the first frame we rendered forward, and now we're gonna render from there backwards. Amazing. Now all this is tracked and looks good. I wonder what this guy is doing, because it's always great to look at your graph editor and see what the different tracks are doing. I'm going to select this one. Okay, it's this one right here, and see what he is doing. If he's floating around or anything. No, it looks fine. Okay, looks like all our trackers are okay. Now click on solve. I'm going to select keyframe because I don't want to determine that myself. Focal length and optical center. And now we're going to solve our camera motion, and that usually takes a while, especially if you have many trackers like I do right now. If you only have 8, because in the end you only need 8 good tracks for a good camera solve. Right now I have a lot, which is not necessary, but we're gonna start with more and then delete some if we have to. Great, we have a solve error of 1.65. In order to get a good track, what we need or what we want is a solve error of less than 1 pixel. So now we're gonna try to delete tracks where the solved error is higher than 1.65. And for that, we're gonna hit on clean up and filter tracks. And now we're gonna increase the error to something higher. I'm gonna do that down here. So let's start with higher than 1.7. Now these tracks, the selected tracks, are the ones where the solved error is higher, but I would be deleting too many. So I'm just gonna increase it a little more until I just deleted enough. Let's go, because you don't wanna go crazy here. Don't delete too many. Okay, now I'm gonna delete them. Now I'm gonna solve my camera again. Great, after solving the camera again, I have a solved error of 1.3. Okay, let's just hope for the best that the tracker is good that the tracking is good enough on the solved error of 1.3. The next step is set up tracking scene and set as background. Now we can see here already that something happened when we look through our camera, which we do. We can see that everything is moving accordingly, but the problem is the position is not right. So we're gonna place an origin. For that, I'm just gonna pick this one because that's where I want my dragon to be, and set origin. Now I'm gonna select 3, which are gonna be my ground, which is the table. 3 very far away from each other, set floor. Now we're actually looking at something useful here. Now the next step is to set the scale. So I'm gonna pick 2 markers where I believe it's around a meter from each other. It's not quite a meter, but something around that. When we set the scale, it's going to increase the size of our 3D models, but it gets closer to what it actually would be if a guy was standing on the table. See, that way we can see that he's standing on the table. When you look at a controller, the controller is not bigger than a foot. Right now it is. So I'm just going to decrease the distance here, set the scale again, and that looks closer. We're going to increase it a little until I feel like, okay, the scale is right. Great. That means in our track we're done for now. If we run into some problems, we can always come back to it, but for now I'm going to go on layout. Now on my top view here, I have my camera view. This is what I see through my actual camera. Down here I can actually work and look around and stuff like that. If I did this, what I'm doing here, just looking around with the middle mouse button, by the way, you can look around. If I did this up here, I would mess up my entire track. So be careful with that. You don't want that. So Control Z to go back. To not accidentally do that, you can go here on view on the right side. If you don't have it here, hit 9, it comes out, and check this off. Now when I look around, it just snaps out of the camera. This is my camera and I can look around. I'm gonna try to keep the camera view. To get in and out the camera view, hit the numpad 0 on the right. On the top view, I'm gonna go in so I can see actually through my shadow catcher, and I can position my dragon to the right position. So they're both standing on the ground, which is good. To move him, I'm gonna hit G, Shift Z, so I'm only gonna move him on along the X and Y axes and position him into the right spot. I'm going to turn him because I want him to be somewhat facing the camera, but I don't want him to collide with any of those real objects, which are not CG. Okay, so this is my scene now. I'm going to move my little Mihal a little away. I'm still going to keep him just for scale references, but we can check him off in the render. On the right here, you can see you can disable things in the render. So I'm definitely not going to render it in the end, because that happens sometimes that you're done and those things were just invisible. So you think, okay, my scene is done, it's all perfect. Then you render it and this guy appears in the render because you didn't check this off. Disable and render is very important. So I'm gonna reposition him a little like this way, turn him because I don't want him to touch any of those objects because they're not real. Okay, now when we look through, we can see it's perfectly tracked. It looks fine. Let's turn this off. Looks great. So even though we had a solved error of 1.3, it looks very good. I see that I come closer with the camera in the end. So actually I'm going to move him a little back, because if I came closer to like a real dragon on my table, I would try to get to the face. So I'm just going to reposition him that it works. Also going to turn him a little, rotate, hit R, and then Z, then you can rotate him only on the Z axis, so not accidentally turn him like into the table or so. Okay, great. We might have to make them smaller too, but let's not worry about that for now. In every Blender scene, I always try to figure out my camera movement first, then my lighting, and then the rest. Because if you do it the other way around, you might get into the trouble that you put too much work and effort into your scenes, and eventually you're not even going to see anything anymore. So let's work on our lighting. We have a very overcast lighting here. I see here on the remote that we have a light source from the right. I know it also because I live there. So I'm gonna find an overcast HDRI where the light source comes from one direction. For that, I'm gonna go here and on my asset browser. I have Polyhaven and I have a bunch of cool HDRIs which are also gonna help with the reflection. So I'm gonna try to find a scene which kind of looks like my living room. Let's use this one for now. Now when I look through cycles, you can see something is happening already. We have light sources coming and it's not completely dark. If I didn't have an HDRI, it would be just completely black. And I don't want that, obviously. So that's a great first step. Now we have to realign a few things. We don't need our light source. And also our ground is in the background collection right now. We don't want that either. We want it to be in the foreground and just delete our background. So that's our ground now. I'm gonna try to align my ground with the actual table. So I scale it down, rotate it. Let's do this in top view. I'm gonna bring one edge to the edge. Let's check off our 3D model so we can see only the ground. Rotate it so it's perfectly aligned with the table. There you go. Go to edit mode, select edge selection mode, trying to extend the table to wherever it's going. Let me see if I also see this edge here. So I try to align it with the edge of my actual table. Because who knows, maybe we're gonna have another object falling off the table, and it'd be cool if that happened with actual gravity. Maybe, so I'm just gonna make sure. So snap back, I'm in object mode. Again, I'm gonna apply the scale because I changed it, and that's good. Let's turn our dragon back on. Looks pretty cool. I told you right here, I wanted to squirt some fire out. Let's see if we can make that happen. So what we're gonna do is Shift A, go to Images as Planes. If you don't have Images as Planes, you can go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and type in Images as Planes, and check this on, go on Save Preferences, then you have Images as Planes as well. And that's a great tool to import 2D assets into your 3D scenes. You can have smoke, you can have fire, you can have dust particles, all kinds. It is very cool. So now I'm going to try to find a cool fire video. There it is. Now obviously it's way too big. I'm going to bring it down, bring it into the position where it has to be. I'm not worried about the rotation because with a cool trick we can turn the rotation and orientation of our planes directly towards the camera, so it's never going to be flat like that. Okay, that's pretty cool. Right in his snout. There you go. Now the problem with that is fire has to be emissive. Emissive means that it makes light. Right now it's a regular principled volume, so we could make it reflective and whatnot, but it's not what we want. We're just gonna delete this one, principled BSDF. If you don't know how to get to the shader editor, either you go up here into shading, or if you have a big screen like I do, you can just go down here on the left and make a shader editor, and then you are here also. So this is our torch. This is our torch video. Now hold Shift A, and I'm gonna make an emission node. Now plug in the color into our color, I believe, and then that into the surface. Now it is emissive. Let's also have a transparent node and mix them two together so we can remove this black background. Use the color for the factor. So now I want the fire to start right when he's looking up. But at first I'm going to try to find like the best position where it's like kind of small. Let's say here. So 217, that's where I want my video to start. Okay, so I changed my offset to 217 because that's where the video actually is where I actually wanted to start. And at start frame, I picked 140 because this is where I want the fire to start appearing. So I'm gonna also animate my emission strength. I turned it to 0, hover over strength. Now I'm gonna go a few frames forward where I want the fire to be the lightest, the brightest, 143. Increase the strength by a lot, hit I. Now after that I'm gonna go back to 0, hover over strength, hit I. Now our emission node should be animated. This is my curve, which I can adjust if I want to, but I'm also gonna animate, I believe, the scale. So I'm just gonna start, I'm gonna bring the origin of my point, of my layer here, I'm gonna bring it to the place where the source of my fire is. That's my origin point, and it's my 3D cursor. I brought it down here, and I'm gonna go on Object, Set Origin to the 3D cursor. So now when I scale it down and up, it scales around this axis. So now I'm gonna go on Item. This is the size I wanted. Let's scale it up a little. So I hover over Scale, hit I, go back to the beginning. I want it to be smaller, like on 0. This one is 0 as well. 1. Now it gets bigger, and after that I want it to be smaller again. So I'm gonna go back to 0, hover over Scale, hit I. Now it's getting bigger. Fire is going back to 0. Okay, now you see that it's like still weirdly tilted in a weird direction. We wanted to track it to the camera. For that, we need a constraint. Object Constraint Properties, add a constraint, and track to. And under the target, I'm going to use my camera. So now it's pointing always towards the camera, doesn't matter where it is. When I look at it in real time, it's a little fast, but that's not a problem. I can always just select my keyframes, scale them up on the y-axis, on the x-axis, and that looks better. Obviously that's not going to be perfect. It's not going to look as good as if, you know, I made like an actual fire simulation, but that's a very fast trick how you can simulate fire real quick, and that's pretty cool. When I look through it in cycles, I see my HDRI. I don't want to see my HDRI, so I'm going to click on my render properties, go down, 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 under film, hit transparent. Now I'm actually going to see my view and my video background. You can see a little that it's transparent. The reason for that is when you go on your camera settings, select your camera settings, and two things we need to adjust here. First one is the opacity of our video. If it's 0, you can see it. If it's on 1, you can see it perfectly. On 50%, it's a little transparent. We want to see it all. So I was seeing in the beginning of my dragon animation that he was looking down. See what he's doing here? So it'd be cool if he just pushed something away, like a soda can or so. So let's try if we can find a 3D model of a soda can. Soda. I'm using Blender Kit here for free assets. I highly recommend it. And now that's the question. Who do you want to do free advertising for? Let's say Coca-Cola. So I'm gonna bring my Coke can here. Obviously you can see it's way too big. It's bigger than our dragon. And really we need to compare it with our other objects on the table, the real objects. So I'm gonna turn off my ground so I can see, does it actually have the right scale in comparison for the remote, for example. And we can always cheat it a little, just a little. But the problem is, it's hard to get away with these things. So it's better to just do it properly, not the way I do it right now. So anyways, he's like, what is he doing? He's going down. And when he's going down, that could be the moment that he push this soda can away. So I'm gonna put it where his head is, and that's gonna be pretty cool. So I'm gonna bring my ground back. I'm gonna make a rigid body simulations. That means I'm gonna have gravity in my scene. That thing here is gonna be an active rigid body. Go on physics properties, rigid body, active, so not a kilo, let's do 0.5. It's not animated. Convex hull, I think box is fine. And now when I go to the very first frame,
it's just going to fall because now it has gravity. When I zoom out here, you see it's just falling. I also don't like those droplets. They're like really cool, but I don't like them in my scene. I'm just going to delete those. Now I want to bring the geometry to the center. Go on Object, Set Geometry, Origin to Geometry. Now it's in the center, which is also not what I want. Set Origin, because when I now select my ground, make it also a rigid body, but that's going to be a passive rigid body. So this one is going to interact with the soda can, the ground here, but it's not going to fall. It's just going to stay. Now let's change this to a convex hull. So now it's just in the ground. Now I could make my dragon here also a rigid body, so he actually pushes it like for real, but that would take more computer time to render. So what I'm gonna do instead, I'm gonna make a new object. Could be anything, I'll just keep it simple. A cube, bring it down in size, maybe make it a little longer, so like this. So this cube, I don't want to be visible in the render, so I'm also gonna turn this off. I'm gonna call it rigid cube, and also gonna make it a rigid body. This one is gonna be animated. When we go to the first frame, it's not gonna fall because it's supposed to be animated. So I'm gonna go to the frame where I see the dragon's head is about to hit him, which is here. Go on Item, Location, and here I just gonna push towards this direction, animate. And now when we look through the entire thing, set my rigid cube to box, apply the scale of my box because I changed the scale. Now when I play it, he pushed it a little. Now that's obviously not enough. I want him to push it real good, and we can cheat it a little. I can bring it up a little. We don't need to animate the Z-axis. I'm just going to delete Z. I'm going to bring it up. Now when he pushes it, it's already better, but let's say the rigid body just goes through all the way. Okay, that's a great start. Now I'm just going to increase the surface response. I need more friction, so it's not going to slide on my ground, it's just going to get pushed over. All good. Okay, when you think you're done with your animation, or with your simulation rather, click on your object, rigid body, and bake to keyframes. Now that it's baked, you do not need your cube anymore. We're just gonna hide it for now in case we do want to change something. Great, so we have the Coke bottle, after that we have the fire, rawr, and that's it. Now it's time to adjust our lighting. Remember how we made it transparent before, but now we actually want to see our HDRI. So we go on film, turn transparent off. And here in cycles, now we can see where our light is coming from. So it's on two sides of the room. That is a stronger light source, so that's gonna be to dragon left. And to adjust that, I just go on Object here, World, rotate my HDRI until it's on the left of the dragon. That looks good. Now in low res, we're gonna render one frame, high noise threshold, so we actually can see what it would look like. And to do that, let's make it transparent again. Now this is one frame, and it looks pretty cool. I'm gonna try to make it look a little more realistic. Like those shadows here of the remote, for example, they are harsher than my dragon shadows, so maybe I'm gonna adjust it with adding another light source, like on dragon right, like an area light. So we're gonna get a little more shadow here, but that looks pretty good. Maybe I can adjust his materials a little more, and also he's gonna need a reflection in the table because all those objects here, they have a reflection, so I'm gonna adjust that too. For that, I'm gonna give my table a material, make it reflective. Under visibility, so the new material, I'm gonna make it black. I'm just gonna crank up the metallic and go down with the roughness so I can actually see that it's actually reflecting. Okay, that's pretty cool. Now we still need to add like another light source, like a stronger one, so we can add these shadows here also, because those are pretty strong. My HDRI doesn't cut it. So we're gonna switch to cycles on top for a moment, add an HDRI, light, add an area light on the right here, on the right of the dragon, left of our guy, make it smaller, point it at our dragon. So now those shadows get closer to what they are actually. The light still not be too big. Smaller the light, the stronger the light, the harsher the shadows. And that's a little too harsh. Let's make it a little bigger. Let's render a frame where our fire is there, so we can see what that looks like. And since the fire is emissive, it also should impact our dragon a little. Just a little bit. If we want to increase that, we would need to add another light because you don't want the emission to be too strong. But it's probably not necessary since it's a very bright scene. If there was like a night scene, like in the darkness, then you could see the fire way better. I can already see our light is too strong, the one we just made, the area light, so I definitely need to decrease that. But the fire looks good. I'm definitely gonna desaturate the fire a little because it's too vibrant. So let's do that. So the light is too strong, let's do half of it. Sometimes I'm just too impatient because it doesn't show right away what it looks like. 10, 5. The good thing about the shadows is because we're gonna render it separately, the video, the dragon and everything, and the shadows separately in 2 different layers, we can adjust them differently, so that's cool. So we don't have to worry about that too much. The only thing we do have to worry about is that the shadow are the same sharpness. I'm gonna adjust the position a little. Great. Now I'm gonna adjust the vibrance of my fire. The way I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna select my fire plane here, make another node, a hue and saturation node, plug it in between the torch and the emission. Now I can decrease the saturation a little. If I go to 0, it's going to be white, so somewhere in between, just that it looks real. There you go. Now here we can see very well, and on this view, how our camera is moving. And it's always so satisfying to see that because that's how I actually was recording that, so that's pretty cool. And if we think we're done, hit on render, composite it in After Effects, and that's the result. Now, if you want to know how to render it properly, that you can set it up in After Effects or any compositing software you're using, the way I do it, you can check out the next video, which is going to be like right here, and see you soon.